You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and this is my conversation with Loki. He's one of the members of a band based in Melbourne. They're called Hybrid Nightmares. This is without doubt one of my favourite interview subjects. Really admire Loki's enthusiasm. So let's hear what he has to say. Let's go. Hybrid Nightmares, wonderful band, and you've been going since 2008. You have a few offerings in market since the self-titled EP, I think, was released in 2012. And, mate, the band does have some identifiable themes that are both visual and musical. And what I'm really saying is you are a very unique blackish metal band. So, mate, in your own words, tell us, or tell the audience, what they need to know about Hybrid Nightmares before I ask you about your excellent new album, Almagest.
Sure. So, my name's Loki. I think for Hybrid Nightmares, we classify ourselves as sort of a progressive extreme band. We don't so much identify with the black metal label as much as perhaps we did in our youth, because we've moved away from a lot of the themes and ideas associated with traditional black metal. And although we are big fans of black metal, I think the topics that we cover as artists differ slightly in that we're more storytellers and fiction artists than we are purveyors of any sort of overarching political, social, or religious ideology. And yeah, we've been going 10 years strong. We released the self-titled quite a while ago now, followed by a concept release of 4 EPs in a year back in 2015. And then finally, after 10 years, we've released our first album, which we're really stoked on. And yeah, heavily influenced by early to the mid-90s science fiction, as well as some modern science fiction, and a great deal of emphasis on storytelling.
Okay, so I hope I pronounced it correct there. So tell me if I haven't. Is it Almagest or Almagest, the name of the new album?
Almagest. Yeah, Almagest.
Okay, so I read that it's actually an Arabic title, so it sounds like something of a concept record as well. So my first question would be, is it the defining Hybrid Nightmares album? Is it the album that you've been waiting to make your entire lives?
Absolutely. I think it's taken, and anyone who's been following the band since day dot, which admittedly is not a few people because it did take us a while to get where we are, will know that Almagest is sort of the culmination of many, many years of storytelling, story crafting, honing what is both very accessible metal record, but very much ours, very much our sound and our approach. Concept-wise, we've always sort of done concept releases, and the story, although not directly related or linear, is certainly set in a similar mindset across every release. We're very proud to be able to offer a different take on our understanding of the way things are with the Almagest record. We couldn't be happier with how it's turned out, and we are all very much we were very much waiting to release this record, I think is the way to say it. Like, even through the studio process,
makes sense.
This is a cracker, and we're immensely proud of how it's come out.
So how do you guys go about constructing a tune that will make a Hybrid Nightmares album? Indeed, let's reference the in-market album, Almagest. Do guitarists Ben and Mick, for example, bring a collection of riffs to a rehearsal room old school, or are the ideas worked on elsewhere, so you email some ideas around that have been recorded onto whatever DAW you decide to use?
We very much adopt what would be considered the old school approach. Every member of Hybrid Nightmares is a contributing writer. So on every release there has been various musical parts, either written or in some way influenced or produced by various members. On the latest release, it is very heavily, at least in the first instance, written by Hellwinter, our bass player. But then it comes to what we call the shop, where we take it to bits, deconstruct it, rework it, chuck that in the bin. Let's try this one tone up, 5 BPM faster, 10 BPM slower, those sorts of things. And the result is often a heavily refined, highly worked on end product, which which everyone's had a piece of influence in. So we don't so much do the what we call riff banking, where you like, here's 10 riffs, let's chuck them in and see how we go. Although we do know our way around DAWs, the Guitar Pros, the Reapers, those sorts of things, it's certainly not something that we use regularly. We prefer the old school approach of studio.
Look, that heartens me, because I was listening to, you obviously know who Jamie Jaster is, the lead singer in Hatebreed and a few other bands I think he's got, and he has an excellent podcast series which I do listen to. A very prominent producer, I think it might have been Zeus or one of the other Metal Blade or Nuclear Blast associated producers, he was saying that he even gets some prominent bands, he didn't mention who they were, coming into the studio with riffs. You talk about a riff bank, they haven't even worked on them prior to going into the studio. So they must wait for him to assemble it. Who was the bloke who helped the Beatles assemble all of the songs? Of course, I remember as soon as the bloody interview's finished.
Well, earlier on the Abbey Road days, it was Alan Parsons had a lot of influence in the early days from production element, but it may not be the
George Martin, I think, is the guy that...
Martin.
It is George Martin, yeah. Alan Parsons. Alan Parsons is also the guy that was the engineer for Pink Floyd as well.
Yeah, he was, yeah. And we're very... some of us are very big. Myself and Ben, especially, are very big Alan Parsons fans. And a lot of the progressive elements we do, the science fiction, the heavily story-driven stuff, is drawn from that old-school prog rock.
That's awesome, mate. iRobot was a tape, because my father had the tape, and that's a soundtrack to my childhood, actually.
Oh, for me, it's all about Sirius. I reckon Sirius, the Alan Parsons Project album, has to be one of the best concept records of all time. From start to finish, it's just engaging, it's clever. And the project always had a certain, up until sort of the late 80s when it sort of departed a bit in my mind, they always had a very powerful approach to storytelling, and without giving the whole plot away themselves, leaving it up to the listener, but also from start to finish, the record is clearly a motif expressed across 10 or 11 parts, rather than like this song, this song, this song. You feel like when you listen to a Parsons album, similar to Yes as well, when you listen to those sorts of albums, they feel like complete works rather than just snatch and grabs from various, as I would say, riff banks. And I think that's from where we come from. And you might approach this later. I'm not sure what else is lined up, but certainly the songwriting is as much a part of what we do as the album crafting, where we sit down. In fact, about 4 weeks out of the studio, we totally reworked the track order on Almagest. That's how much we think that element matters. The entire content of the record itself changed a month out because we weren't satisfied with the flow and the linear nature of the story.
So do your fans understand that aspect of the way you approach writing songs and the like? Do they know that about you? Are you very engaged on social media with your fans, and are they aware of the attention to detail that you go to in terms of creating a concept?
I think the fans who... We're not so much on the hard and fast marketing. We love to reach out to people who engage with us. So anyone who engages with us, I'll invest, dedicate as much time of my time as they want to help them feel like they are part of our family, our cult, if you like, because they are so devoted. And I think the people who do spend the time on the records and listen to them multiple times, or even so insofar as taking the booklets out and assembling them in various ways, there's patterns, there's rules, and there's cryptic stuff that we work into the records, the physical records themselves. I think they are aware, and I think part of something that's really important from my perspective about what we do is that there is sort of a next level of appreciation or understanding for people who want to put in the time. That said, there's still a lot there for people who, want to just have listen to a few bangers and then move on to the next record. Although I wish they'd sit on my record forever. I think what we have to offer in terms of that really sinking your teeth into an album, that's something we're very very conscious of and do try to communicate to our fans.
The band remind me a little bit of Nocturnus AD. Does that resonate?
somewhat, without being intimately familiar with their catalogue. It's hard for me to say. But in what regard do you think what we do sort of resembles what they do?
Science fiction with a concept. That's really it. Probably not the music, although the music is. I would say that there are similarities. Definitely not about the music, though. It's more about the theme and the concept. And you're probably the two most prominent sci-fi-based Blackish metal. And I know you've already said that it's a bit different to Blackish metal, but I think you know what I mean in terms of the tonal aspects of the music.
Yeah, I do. No, I do. I do. And if perhaps moving on to material I'm more familiar with, I think we sort of consider ourselves a lot like Vector, who do that sort of black metal, but it's actually thrash, but it's science fiction based thrash, and it's very much grounded in not as science fiction as well as actual cosmic science. And I think Vector is a band that we sort of align, we briefly align ourselves with. Unfortunately, I am not as familiar with Nocturnus AD's material, but certainly something now that I know that they're sci-fi guys, I'll be sure to look it up. Absolutely, that's my main racket. So
something else.
Like good.
Yeah, I think you'd enjoy their music, and I noticed that some of the social media posts that the band put on their Facebook page, I think it was, were some fans actually turned up dressed as some of the characters through their songs.
Fantastic.
That's
really cool.
Is that something that you would anticipate, or do you get at the moment with fans coming to your shows?
We have in the past had people. We get a lot of DIY costumes, which is really cool. People sort of take our imagery and apply it to, they bleach their own singlets, or they when we went through the robes for the first and second age, we had people coming to our shows in robes, which was really cool. With the new release, we're wearing fully kitted out armor, and we'd love to see people come to our shows in science fiction armor with lasers and laser weapons and that sort of thing. That would be a really cool thing to see. Sort of harkens back to like the early to mid-era Gua days, when the fans were this mix of crust guys and punks, as well as total nerds who like to come dressed up. And I think going out to a show and dressing up is one of the most fun things you can do. So yeah, certainly people come to the shows dressed up. We have seen it in the past, and we encourage it. Live metal and metal in general is a place for freedom of expression. And if that's how they want to express themselves, then I endorse that 100%. And Hybrid endorses that 100%.
And just talking about the adaptation of characters and the like in the audience, you are touring the land that cosplay originated in, Japan, with Helvetii, and I've got to congratulate you on that tour, because I had a chat to Schriegel earlier in the year, man, and he's a fantastic bloke, and by extension the band are a wonderful band. So how did you get the opportunity to tour with them?
So the touring agents who are touring us with Helvetii, as well as a band called Hippocras, who we have toured with previously, and another band called Abanchova, who we haven't met yet, we're looking forward to hanging out with. They toured us with Fintroll at the start of 2016. And so we sort of got back in contact with them, and so we got the new record out. We'd love to come back. Let's try and tee something up. And the Helvetii opportunity came up, and the timing was right. And so we said, yeah, let's just go for it. And fortunately, Hippocras, who are also on the Helvetii tour, we toured with them as part of the Fintroll tour, and they're really nice guys. So we're looking forward to catching up with them and meeting the Abanchova guys and meeting the Helvetii guys and kicking on with a few dates. It should be a great deal of fun.
Mate, it's a heck of a bill, and I need to ask, is there a chance that the bill could tour Australia?
As much as I would like to say yes, I'm not actually sure if Helvetii are coming or not. I do know that time of year is quite busy with the recent announcements of cattle decapitations during this necroptic in that same week. As well as that, you've got Venom within a few weeks, and there have been several other tour announcements sort of February, March, that have already gone through. And most of the guys who I would expect to tour Helvetii are already running tours at around that time. So although I would say, I would love to say, yes, they're coming, yes, we're on the bill, and that would be a match made in heaven, I'm not sure it's happening. Especially this late in the piece, Australian tours these days need to be announced 4 or 5 months out to make sure the pre-sale's there. Given the amazing amount of tours that are coming through, we're announcing them earlier than ever. To not see Helvetii announced 3 months out isn't unusual. That said, anything is possible. You know, it's the digital age. Securing visas and tickets and time is quite easy these days, and maybe someone will bring them out. They've been brought out by Metropolis Touring in the past, I believe, and I can't see why they wouldn't want to come back, but whether they will or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, you raise an important point. I'm honestly run off my feet with interviews. I know we talked about this off air, but I run off my feet with interviews for international touring bands and artists, so much so that I rarely get the opportunity to chat to local artists, such as the amount of time that I've got to dedicate to this. It's already basically taken up with international artists. You know, which is probably a good thing to have, because I'm talking to a lot of people that I really respect and admire, particularly talking to actually a different genre completely, but Al Anderson, who was the guitarist in Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, talking to him a couple of days ago, and he issued me probably the most sincere compliment I've ever been given by really anybody in the circle of work that we're doing. I'm also a musician, but I perform in covers bands because this is how I earn my living, through journalism and through musical performance.
Sure.
But when I mentioned I was a working musician, he said, "Well, man, you're doing it then. You're a real musician." Now, for me to hear that from him, whose music I've listened to, I mean, who hasn't been listening to Bob Marley practically all of their lives, even by bloody osmosis? You can't avoid his music, let's put it that way.
It's everywhere, yeah.
You know, as a young fella, I never wanted to be a rock star, never wanted to move to LA or New York or London or what have you and try to make it, as they say. I just wanted to be a working musician. So to receive that validation from one of the greats is tremendous. So anyway, just thought I'd digress and throw that little story in there in our interview here.
It's a good story to have. Being able to be proud of what you do, especially in an environment now where live music and touring music is as tough as it's ever been, if not tougher. Certainly something worth mentioning and something to be immensely proud of. I think all musicians in every capacity should be proud of what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's a really good point there. I think if you're putting in the effort and you're really doing it, I really admire and respect Australian artists such as yourself, because I know how difficult it is to, frankly, keep your collective, you know what, together in a rehearsal room and then get out there and then do all of the necessary marketing in order to raise the band's profile and book shows. And I was chatting to, God, I'm going to forget his name now. I've got a shocking short-term memory, but the lad from Almagest, you know, and, you know, those guys, mate, they're doing it like you guys, you know, they're doing it. They've got tours happening offshore. They've spent months in Europe just booking shows and doing what it is that they do. And you've really got to approach it as a career. Is that something that resonates for you?
Absolutely. The Largestine guys, although we haven't played with them since the Glory Hammer tour, we've got an immense sort of respect for them in that they are one of Australia's hardest working touring heavy metal bands. And I think that any band taking that approach, another great example is a band like Earthrot from Perth. Anyone who's willing to sort of go out on a limb and invest themselves, their time, their livelihoods fully in a passion like music, which at the moment is quite hard to make a go of, there's an immense amount of respect there, without a doubt.
Yeah, and let's talk about the scene you're a part of now. So you are a part of the Melbourne metal scene, and of course there's no question about it. It's the strongest in the country. So what's your take on Melbourne and being a band from Melbourne?
I think being a band from Melbourne, it's the ultimate leg up, but also it presents its own challenges. Because we are from Melbourne, which has one of the best scenes in terms of attendance, at least in the country, and in terms of number of bands per punter, there's lots of them. So it's good that there's plenty of bills to jump on. You know, we sold out Cherry Bar with a very trashy lineup the same night King Parrot sold it out the Corner Hotel, and so it gives you an idea. And there was another show nearby in the Melbourne CBD which sold out as well. Gives you an idea of sort of the levels of attendance. There's sort of 1,500 people at metal shows in one night, and I'm sure there were other shows going on both within and outside of metal in Melbourne that night. But it also presents a unique challenge in that there are so many great bands. You really have to be outstanding to get noticed. A lot of bands from interstate, and there are some fantastic Australian metal bands from outside of Melbourne, guys like Dead Space, Rise of Avernus, Earth Ruins, Elkinwood from Queensland, just to name a few that I really respect and admire. They have the benefit of being best in class because there's not much going on in those cities. Whereas if you're in Melbourne, we are faced not with competition, but certainly with being compared to bands like Orpheus and Harlot, Bellacore, all these phenomenal acts. And especially for a young band now, like we've been around 10 years, so we've been around for a while, but younger bands now are faced with this scene of infinite opportunity, but also infinite obstacles, because there are all these fantastic bands coming out. The key to the Melbourne scene's success over the last few years, and we sort of noticed it right around when the Second Age came out in 2015, was everyone started helping each other. We started booking each other, pumping each other up, coming to each other's shows, as well as saying, we'll make sure when we're available that night, or we'll make sure we're not playing that night, so you guys have a good run. Oh, you've got an album launch on, right, we won't play, we make sure you're well attended. And that went a long way, at least for the bands around from that era, to securing the success of those bands at the time. There's a lot of cooperation, and I think that's also something that is quite unique to the Melbourne metal scene. We're very collaborative, we're very cooperative. There's not this, we're going to overbook them to make sure they fail, and those guys are doing really well, let's piss them off, that sort of thing. It's very much a collaborative, cooperative approach to everything we do. And everyone I'd say most people, because I can't speak for everyone, but most people want to make sure that everyone's getting a fair go. And, typically Australian anything very much, although we like to say we're about a fair go, there's a significant element of tall poppy in this country, and the Melbourne metal scene's gone a long way to try and destroy that, because everyone does deserve a fair go. And if you are good, you will get the support and recognition that you deserve and you've worked for.
So I'm not giving anything away here that the man hasn't spoken about himself, but I had a good chat to Jesse from Dark Cell, who are a band that hail from near me on the sunny coast. He mentioned the tall poppy thing as well. Now, I have spoken about this to the Australian artists that I've had a chat to. Yeah. To what extent have you felt it, or can you give me some detail? What I'd like to do is, I remember coming through as a musician myself. I was in a band called Velveteen back in the day, and we did some stuff with Thirsty Merc and a few other local bands who were sort of on FM radio. And I can't say I ever felt it from the bigger bands, but I can tell you for a fact, mate, I did feel it from some of the other smaller bands around us, and we were a small band. But it does feel like sometimes it's a bit like the crabs trying to claw out of the plastic bucket, so to speak. There's an analogy about that on the internet. People can look up that. But trying to pull the crabs down as they're trying to get out of the bucket. To what extent did you feel, or have you felt the tall poppy syndrome? Because to me, it's absurd.
I feel as though back in our early days, we both felt it and may have been victims of it. In fact, we sort of looked around and said, oh, how come these guys are getting this opportunity, and how come they've got all these connections and these things that we don't have? This is unfair, it's their fault. And only at the point where we sort of acknowledged, and it seemed to click for a lot of Melbourne bands at roughly the same time, only at the point where we all said, hang on a minute, we should be using these events that are, these blessings, these fortunate things that have happened to other bands as inspiration. We should be turning to these guys not with scorn and not with jealousy and envy and petty nonsense and going, oh, I can't believe they got this. We all turned to each other and said, how'd you do that? I want to be like you. You are successful. And that's what I want for me. And if you can approach those successful people who you don't so much idolize, but you respect and acknowledge their achievements with a degree of humility and wanting to understand and know, they will help you. And I think dismantling the idea that your lack of success is everyone else's problem is essential. Your people's lack of success is entirely theirs. It's not because they got opportunity A or someone else got opportunity B. We spent so many years without help. We've never had management. It took us 5 or 6 years to secure an international support. It was only through sheer determination and hammer to the skull did we get our first international support. And for many years, and I know a lot of Australian bands in our sort of vintage have experienced that bitterness, that sourness, that envy. But then, as I say, a lot of us all at the same time sort of just clicked and went, why are we, why do we, pin our issues on other people? And now I think because of that, it's Victorian metal, Melbourne metal. I say Victorian because the regional bands in Victoria are just stunning as well. Victorian metal has benefited from somewhat of a golden age of understanding and reaching out and trying to help each other. We got young guys who I like to mentor, and they call me up at any time of the day, all night, for a bit of advice and information, and I gleefully give that out. Whereas in my day, people hoarded their contacts or hoarded their intellectual property. Again, a hybrid. Brimstone Bookings, which is the booking agency myself and Michael, our guitarist, run, as well as several other eminent Melbourne promoters and artists, have very much focused on dismantling, destroying, crushing the idea that you have to be envious or jealous of someone else. You should use that as inspiration, like most successful entrepreneurs would. Most successful business people will say, that's how they did it. I want to be, I don't envy them. I want to be like them. You want to emulate, not envy.
No, I agree. And something that's just clicked in response to your wonderful answer to the question or to the statement that I made is that I don't think the rise in Aussie metal, see, to me, I've been a long-time listener of metal, 25 years, okay, particularly Australian metal. I've searched for bands, and I remember the bad old days, mate, where, I'm not saying it's the band's fault at all, but, our biggest band was Super Heist, and gosh, I'll reframe it. It's not the bad old day because our biggest day was Super Heist. I love Richie Norton. I've recorded with him. He's a wonderful human being. But I remember when our biggest band, you could name them. There was like Damaged, Super Heist, Destroyer 666, Jesus, it's a very skinny list after that. And of course, they're all from Melbourne. Okay. Now, my point would be, seems
you can't discount guys like Sadistic Execution and those guys as well. They went a long way. Lord Chaos is a big one for me back then.
Oh God, you remember them? I bought that album as soon as it came out from Warhead Records.
I don't remember them. I'm 27, but I do acknowledge and respect the contribution they made to early Australian metal alongside guys like Damaged, Destroyer. They're the bands that I recall having had somewhat of a black metal youth, if you like. And even guys like the Berserker, they all went on to do fantastic things in other bands.
King Parrot. Some of the guys I think went on to King Parrot,
They did. And then there's the Blood Dust, the connections of Bramelin from back in the day. Damage, as you've said, is a massive one. I think Australian metal is often overlooked in a historical context. Even Bengal Tigers had quite a bit of influence both here and abroad. And I think Australian metal in a historical context, especially in that late 80s, early 90s, is quite often overlooked. Sorry, that's a digression from what you were saying about your experience at that time. So sorry about that.
No, that's all good. I lived through it. So, there's things that you're going to miss because you try to go to shows and all the rest of it. And I remember going to shows when there were about 15 people at them. Some of the local shows, and they're like, these days, there's no way there's going to be 15 people at the Jubilee Hotel here in the Valley in Brizzy or wherever it might be in whatever city you're in. But I'm just saying, I remember back in the day when the most prominent bands were basically the bands that I mentioned. I forgot about Sadistic Execution, of course. How could I forget them? They're the band that inspired so much of the, what would you call it, oral depravity of the Norse or the Scandinavian metal scene. They're nuts, those guys.
Yeah, the Rev and Skits, the outside, oft under-acknowledged influence they had on metal globally is phenomenal. I'd like nothing more than to see them get back together and do a run. I know that was unlikely to ever happen now, for a number of reasons. But just the influence of Australian bands, even Lord Chaos. One of the guys from Lord Chaos went on to join Dimmu Borgir, and of course the setup that Dimmu Borgir had in the mid to late 90s in terms of global accessible black metal, Dimmu Borgir being my favourite band. The influence that I think his name was
Astanu. I think he's Astanu or Astanu.
Yeah, Astanu or Astanu. either way you cut it. The influence he had on those first couple of albums, or the ones he was involved with, went on to, with contemporaries like Cradle of Filth, went on to influence countless bands across multiple genres within extreme and gothic and black metal. The Australian contribution to global metal is, I can't say it any other way, oft underappreciated, but certainly not. Global metal wouldn't be the same without the contributions of these underground guys back in the day. Yeah,
I totally understand your point. Yeah, yeah. And look, the other point that I was making is I think when a lot of that, it sounds like it's lessened to a degree, right, in Melbourne. So it's no coincidence that so many of the great bands, so Desecrator, Harlot, you mentioned, or even Neo, or not even, of course, Neo, they're probably one of the biggest bands in the country right now. When bands started to help each other, it fostered all these wonderful bands and the prominence of these wonderful bands. And I think, the point that you made earlier, I've just sort of clicked on that. It's clicked for me that that's maybe what it was that as soon as the bands started to work together, it fostered a scene in which all of these musicians could get together and form bands and go, we've actually got a real crack at this.
Yeah.
And that's...
I can remember times when I was much younger where guys like myself and Chris DeMelco, or myself and Andy from Harlot, may have had a bit of back and forth banter, a bit of underestimation of each other's capabilities. And you've only got to look at the success of Orpheus, Omega, Harlot, and, when we're nearly there, but Hybrid Nightmares, to see that the minute we all stopped digging at each other and started, trying to help each other, respecting each other, working together, you can see the outward effect that that's had. Now, I'm not saying that Hybrid Nightmares is in any way responsible for the success of either of those bands, but what I am suggesting is that focusing on what we're doing and how we can get better, rather than focusing on what everybody else is doing and how we can, it's not us, it's them. Moving away from that mentality and focusing inward on how we can improve and emulating each other, I think that's where the thing clicked for us.
Yeah, fostering a spirit of mateship and brotherhood in the scene is also what you're saying as well, and that helps enormously.
Well, I can count on one hand people in the Victorian scene who I wouldn't drink with, and every other person I would gleefully go out and get blackout with. I have and even on that one hand, I harbour no ill will towards any of them. I think we're just different people. But I think now that the mateship, the brotherhood, as you say, I think that has gone a long way to setting Melbourne aside as one of the greatest cities for metal in the world, and certainly the Australian capital, at least in terms of size and health of the scene. And again, I stress that's not to underestimate the quality of bands coming out of every other city, every other state or territory in this country. But I think Melbourne is unique in the sense that we do have consistently well-attended shows. The calibre of bands is as good as nationally, but there's more of them per punter, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. And you mentioned Cherry Bar, I think, which, I'm obviously from here, and I worked for Telstra up until a couple of months ago. After 11 years, I got out to focus on this, actually, and this and musical performance. And look, I used to go down to Melbourne for conferences and to meet customers and the like, and I always stopped by Cherry Bar, and I got to tell you, I always used to get drunk at Cherry Bar and have a fantastic time and talk to people I just met down there, and it's one of the few places in Australia in a bar that I really felt totally comfortable. And
I can assure you that any beer you spilt all that time ago is still soaked through the carpet, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
Cool, mate. All right, I've got to ask you this question: how do you differentiate the band when promoting online through social media? Because I was having a good chat via email with Chris Broderick, who was in Megadeth and has now got the excellent Active Defiance, excellent thrash band that he's in now, and it's a question that I put to him because I noticed that when I say only, for a North American band to have access to that market, they've only got about 25,000 followers on Facebook or so, which is probably the equivalent to having about 250 if you're in Australia. No disrespect to the man or the band, because I've just given them a glowing review on the Metal Obsession website, their new album, and also I said I did the interview. It featured as an article on the website. But for you guys, how do you cut through it all? Because, my God, there are so many bands doing so much these days, and I know even with my own Scars and Guitars Facebook page and the like. I have to spend a fortune through Facebook if I want to get anywhere near the likes that I feel can attract people to listen to so many of the wonderful interviews, including this one here.
Mm. It is really tough, and we're constantly having to adapt and change what could be considered marketing, but we call engagement, because the digital environment is shifting so constantly, and you are competing for attention. You're competing for people's likes, their views, if you are so inclined, their money. Although money certainly isn't the main factor for us. Everyone who buys a CD helps us get on the road and that sort of thing. And I suppose the way we do it is we've long maintained very strong, very friendly connections with dedicated fans. I think that's where we're quite fortunate, is we do have a group of people who are, without a doubt, our biggest supporters, who we love unconditionally, along with all our other fans, but they always make the effort to reach out. They take out the booklet. They try and understand the concept. They stay up late with us and talk about what they think it means to them. And I think that's how we cut through a lot of the guff that perhaps other bands experience. The only other thing I can think that helps us set ourselves apart is our image. We are very much a live act, although the album we're immensely proud of, is fantastic release in my estimation. It translates really well live, whereas a lot of bands struggle these days to make that, because it is quite easy to set up the home studio and bust out an EP or an album that sounds pretty damn good. You can do that on a good budget these days and get a really good result. But those guys, I think, sometimes have difficulty translating live, and how we cut through a lot of the online stuff. If people have seen us play, they see us play in full sets of armor. They see us play 45-minute to an hour sets, uninterrupted, no stress, well, a little bit of sweat, but and do it gleefully and joyfully, and every night if we could. And I think that's what helps us cut through a lot of the online stuff, is the fact that we do have a really engaging, powerful live presence. I will say that, going back to my earlier remark, just to clarify about, you're vying for attention and that sort of thing, I'm not for a minute suggesting that we're competing for attention with other musicians, more so that there is an unlimited, unfathomable amount of content out there on the web these days. And the web is where most of the marketing is done, most of the time of people is spent. And we're competing with Kim Kardashian's nude romp in Ibiza, and we're competing with the royal wedding now. We're competing with Australia's crappy performance against Honduras. We're competing with all these horrible politicians and politicianettes from all over the damn world. And we're competing with tragedy, because there are so many horrible things happening all over the planet that consume and vie for our passions and our attention, that being a positive, happy, uplifting influencer or uplifting character, or trying to convey an artistic notion that is so separate from all these ugly, horrible truths we find ourselves exposed to every day, it is a challenge. You're constantly barraged with horrible things happening all over the world, and trying to be a beacon of freedom of expression, of happiness in yourself, of brotherhood and mateship, as you say, it becomes a laborious, but certainly not a duty that we shy away from. I think it's an immense privilege to be an artist these days, because you, even against all these adversities facing the world and this constant barrage of information and content and bullshit, to be a musician in this world who people will come and see or support, who get the opportunity to talk to journalists who listen to them ramble, and those sorts of things, is an immense honour and privilege. And so I think wearing that mantle and embracing that mantle helps us cut through a lot of the guff as well. It's not so much the churn and burn, this is the new album, this is the tour, make sure you buy a T-shirt, thanks very much for your time. But understanding the immense impetus, influence, we don't have immense influence, but the immense privilege that it is to have people want to listen to you, and you feel like you do have something relevant and important to say, even if it is just be yourself and be happy in yourself. And knowing that that's a privilege we are afforded, I think that helps us cut through a lot of the crap that's going on, especially on the internet and especially with modern media. That's probably a much longer answer than you would have liked, but it's the most succinct way I can put it without disparaging absolutely every major news outlet in the world.
It's a wonderful response, and what I'm also hearing, mate, is that you're not just competing against metal bands or even other bands in general, whether it be from any genre. You're competing against all of the bullshit that's on the internet and clickbait culture as well, which I can't bloody stand. Well, let me just share this story with you and with the listener. Okay, so when I first started doing this in January of this year, okay, I caught on very quickly that it's not about the way that I was asking questions, but one interview that I did in particular was with Carl Willits, the brilliant frontman for Bolt Throwers, now in Memoriam. And he made some comments in response to I think I asked him about Trump because Trump had just been elected, of course. Now, he gave me a very long, very detailed answer to that. I thought, okay, I thought it was a very good answer, actually. Blabbermouth picked up on it. I've had this happen a couple of times now. Now, I don't think I need to finish a sentence for someone like yourself, but for the listeners out there, what Blabbermouth do is they run with these things and they turn them into something that resembles clickbait. Now, I'm not even necessarily blaming Borovoj and the team at Blabbermouth for needing to do that. It says more about human nature and our psyche, really, isn't it? We're only really interested in controversy, conspiracy, and I don't know how else to say it, but bullshit. I made a decision after that I would never ask a band a controversial question. I certainly wouldn't go out of my way to promote the response to a question if I felt it was deemed controversial. I've even gotten to a point where once an interview is completed, I've asked an artist or a musician if they want me to edit parts of it out. Because I don't want anything that I'm associated with to rise to prominence because it's anything other than the wonderful musicianship and artistry that a band's bringing to market. And I posted something on my Facebook page recently. The third-time return frontman for Morbid Angel basically made a statement summarising what I've just said there. He said, look, all of you podcasters, we didn't say these words exactly, but this is effectively what he said. All of you podcasters and part-time journalists, got my hand up on that one there, don't buy into the clickbait culture of it all. Focus on what we're trying to do as a scene. We're bringing entertainment to people. We've all got, most of us have got day jobs and are just trying to get by in this world. And metal and hard rock and all the genres of music out there, that's just people's release. So let's focus on that, the real positive aspect of it.
Yeah, I think participating in art in any way should be an inherently joyful experience. And I think the world at the moment, a lot of the time, and sometimes brings me to tears and physical illness, can be an immensely joyless, shitty place to exist. And I think being able to engage in art, whether you're creating or assessing or sharing or discussing art, physical art, literature, visual art, music, freedom of expression and freedom of the soul, the human condition, the want to be understood. I think if you can engage in that in any way, you've met the challenge. You've beaten the competition. You've conquered the clickbait culture. And independent journalists like yourself and independent artists like us, I think, have a responsibility and a greater joy than most others in that we can do this freely for love and joy. It sounds so weird coming from an extreme metal artist, but I think that's my truth, and I think that's Hybrid Nightmare's truth.
I think you bang on, mate. I think you're spot on with what you're saying.
We do it for joy.
It is. You are, and I've maintained, and this is not the first time I've said this publicly on air. What I say is it's the musicians, the artists, the vagrants, and the weirdos that make the world turn around because we're creators, right? The corporate bankers, the lawyers, the solicitors, and the like, all they're doing is, well, shit, I hate to say it, mate, but they're adding to the world's misery for the most part.
They do their best to get by, but what they miss, and some of them are musicians and painters and artists, but what they miss is there is more to life than the pursuit of the almighty Allah. There is more to life than the pursuit of physical comfort, mental discomfort. goes a long way, I think, in this world. And people who've been exposed to various forms of mental discomfort or mental or physical displacement, if you like, think the mind is like a garden, and I think that's like growth. It's like feed for the mind. And the pursuit of, not the pursuit of discomfort, but the engagement of discomfort, the engagement of aspects of your life and your physical being that aren't necessarily money driven, go a long way in developing human culture. You always look at, it goes back to science fiction, again, which we discussed earlier. Most of the successful societies in science fiction are ones that have advanced beyond the need for money. They've advanced beyond the need for physical comfort, and they find comfort at a metaphysical level because they've reached a point where all that matters is the pursuit of knowledge or understanding or freedom or creative expression, and they've escaped the trappings of physical comfort and the best looking bloke or the hottest chick or the nicest car or the biggest plane or whatever it is you want. And it's hard to compare science fiction to reality. For most people, I see a lot of truth in science fiction because it's like the innate, it's the pursuit of what we want. And most of those successful societies have abandoned that. And I think art is a big part of escaping that dependence on physical material things. That said, I like going on holiday and I like having things that appeal to me, but the relentless pursuit of money or even comfort, comfort beyond what's necessary is mind-boggling. I get that everyone needs a place to be warm and sleep and eat, and we're very lucky in this country to have all those things and be safe basically everywhere we go. But beyond that, the big yacht and that stuff, I think if we spend as much time on that, if we spend as much time on art as we do on that, then we'd be much further along.
I'm going to ask you a question now. I wasn't planning on asking this one here, but you've provided some insight into your psyche here.
Sure.
Joe Rogan on his podcast talks about universal basic income, because I actually agree with everything that you've just said there. Okay, and I also believe that if there was a universal basic income, I don't know, pick a number, 40 grand or what have you, and you were also supplied with the basic necessities of life, like you correctly pointed out in Australia, we basically have here like universal income, universal healthcare, universal education, at least up to high school level and the like. Do you think that some of these doctors, solicitors, corporate bankers, people who are, they're turning over a buck, but I agree with you from the perspective, I've met a lot of people that are in that sphere because I've dealt with some of them at Telstra, and they do tell me, I play a P bass or a Fender P bass, that is, or a jazz bass or what have you, and they actually can tell me in some detail the model that they've got and the amplification that they like to use, and I can see that look in their eye that that's actually what they'd rather be doing, but it doesn't provide an earn for them. So do you think if there was a universal basic income, let's talk about Australia because that's where we're both from, do you think that our society would be able to move forward at a greater rate than the inches that we're doing at the moment?
It's a tough one because it's a question of viability. I myself work in a superannuation fund. I work as a customer service manager for about 450 people. I liaise with Centrelink on their behalf. The fund manages their retirement savings for them, and we give unlimited free advice, provided you're a member of the fund, to our members. And I think so I do participate in somewhat misunderstood white-collar metalhead, if you like. I think universal basic income principally is a fantastic idea because it may enable people who are perhaps trapped in an environment where they are earning just to live, right? They're working, they're living to work. It might allow those people freedom to pursue creative outlets or pursue their passions. I very much work to live. My approach to my work and everything I do, both in my main job as well as the small business I run. I work as a merchandiser for Australian heavy and international heavy metal bands, funnily enough. My approach to that is very much work to live. I like to enjoy myself with my money rather than pursue, nonsense. The universal basic income is an interesting test. I can only use myself as an example, whereby if I was earning enough to get by comfortably and still do music, that would be great. I think the difficulty we face is there are so many roles in demand that have a lot of stress or responsibility or liability attached to them, which is often underestimated. And people who do those jobs where there is a lot of onus, for example, you have someone's life or well-being in your hands, or you have someone's future resting upon the decisions and the way you approach a certain problem. I think the complexity and the severity of their decisions is often underestimated. And as such, people go, oh, you know, they're making this much or they're entitled to that much money. They're getting more than I think they're worth. I don't agree with that notion. I think that entrepreneurship and creativity should be encouraged, and the pursuit of money encourages entrepreneurship and that sort of thing. But from a creative, I suppose I'm somewhat torn in a way then, because from a creative perspective, I would love to see so many of my artistic friends who can think laterally and create and innovate. I would love to see them escape the trappings of their mundane work in order to pursue those things. I think culturally, artistically, we'd be much further along, absolutely. But that said, some jobs get higher pay because of the liability that's attached to them. Certainly not mine, because my job is essentially a job of care, and I love talking to my clients, meeting with them, having a tea or coffee or whatever it might be, and just chatting away. But I don't necessarily agree with the CEO of the Commonwealth Bank getting 20 million or whatever.
I think that's what we're talking about there. It's that culture of greed that's associated with white collar or corporate world. And look, as I say, I've just come from Telstra, and I don't have a bad word to say about Telstra as an employer. I think they're a fantastic employer, but for my own reasons, I got to the age of 39 after 11 years of being an account executive in there, and I just couldn't do it anymore. It's as simple as that. And I didn't want to let anybody down. That's the truth of it. Including myself, by the way. I just remember one night saying, I said to my wife, I don't think I can do this anymore. And she said, all right, well, we're in a pretty secure position at the moment, so why don't you go and pursue your passion? And that's effectively what I'm doing.
That's what the universal basic income would provide for many, is that security and that freedom to pursue their passion. That doesn't prevent them. For example, if there was a UBI and it was $40,000 a year, right, I would gleefully take that on top of my current wage, and that would allow me to do so much more with my art, because I would have access to an unlimited amount, not an unlimited amount, but a significantly greater amount of resources. I could spend money on, as you say, cutting through the guff for the Facebook marketing. I could invest in other bands, which is something I'm very interested in doing as I grow older and longer in the scene. That would provide me those opportunities, whereas now what I basically do is feed and live and invest what I can in Hybrid Nightmares and Brimstone bookings. But you've only got to look at a band of 5 people. If they're all working, but they're all getting, as you say, that $40,000 extra, there's $200,000 per Australian band that they can reinvest in their art. And that creates a massive export economy for Australian artists. It's not just bands, it's painters, it's writers.
It's all the associated industry, isn't it? There's so many things it touches. Yeah,
exactly. And it feeds on to the journalists who write about it and the bloggers and all these people who could be satisfied and financially secure, feed themselves, feed their families, and contribute to this overwhelming, bubbling pot of cultural goodness and joy that art is. It's hard to fathom how much better off everyone would be. That said, the viability is a massive deal, because it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but I can think of plenty of my mates who, if they were getting their 40, they wouldn't work. And that 40 at the top end doesn't make much of a difference. Your Sol Trujillo's, he's getting his million, 40 G's. Why bother? Why should I give my money away?
Well, he's taken his money and he's gone back overseas. That's the thing there. So the money that he's earned from us is gone back to the US.
Spend all his bloody money on these executives and they go home. And it comes out of this Panama Papers and all this other stuff that's happening at the moment, whereby all these companies who flex the sweat and blood of Australian creatives and non-creatives workers and squeeze every last bloody milliliter of vitality out of human life and then soak it up like a sponge and rinse the sponge out in some foreign tax haven. It boils my blood black. There's not reinvesting in the people who've put so much into them. And they are the people who the UBI would benefit, because they could say, bugger this, I'm done. You go punish some other poor bastard because I've had enough.
Yeah. And that's my view on it. Yeah, I mean, there are so many. I'm not going to mention any corporations because I don't want to get sued, but there are so many corporations out there that are inherently psychopathic. You know that?
Oh.
If they're a human being, you go, you're not just a narcissist or a sociopath, you're a goddamn psychopath. You're taking pleasure in the fact that you know people are physically uncomfortable because of what you're doing.
And the ignorance of other people to the plight of people in those positions is irreconcilable in my mind. The fact that for many years I lacked empathy. I'm quite narcissistic and arrogant, and I have spent so much time trying to get away from that part of me because I don't want to be that guy anymore. I'm trying to build empathy and understand how other people feel. But even then, I look at some of these corporations and people in charge who willingly allow children to suffer and starve and die at their mother's breast for the benefit of another yacht or another house or a margin, and it sickens me. It disgusts me. I sound like a bit left here, but it's unfathomable to me that people could be so careless and so heartless towards the lives of others. And yeah, we're all guilty. We're all guilty of occasionally making light of those things, but there is a difference between finding humor in the complete despair that is humanity sometimes, and these bastards and bitches who actively go out of their way through ignorance and lack of empathy to punish other people who they don't think are people. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, and agreed. Yeah, and it's I think as musicians, artists, and content creators, we're all similar minded. Whether you're, politically left or what have you, we all agree in a fair go for all, and we all would love to be able to do this as our full time commitment. Look, and I'm giving it a red hot go at the moment, but I have a feeling that certainly in the midterm future, I'll have to go back and find something pretty serious again. I've made a decision that I'll probably never go back into a corporate role again because I'm simply just done. I'm cooked. I can't do it anymore and go back into an environment where I've got to meet KPIs and have all the stresses and pressures of customer expectations and the like. It's just not good for me. That's just the way that I'm built. I think I'll do something, where I'm basically my own boss, and I know I won't be on anywhere near the money that I was on beforehand, but I don't need to be, frankly.
Yeah, and having that security and the conviction to say, despite this may afford me some societal advantage, that societal advantage is far outweighed by the freedom and the obvious satisfaction that you get from what you're doing now. And that's so important. If people could just see that and be able to be secure in themselves and their passion, the world would be a much better place instead of cutting each other down at the shins for a buck. This goes back to how the Melbourne scene, I think, since 2015, from my understanding, that's certainly when I started to notice it, that's where it's worked, is instead of trying to chop each other down at the shins, we work together to make sure everyone's being built up. If you want to call it a universal basic income of goodwill, it was an income of goodwill towards other musicians instead of, I want more, he wants less. I want more, he deserves less, that sort of crap that we deal with as people. We're expected to engage in. The universal, I've got to coin this, universal basic income of goodwill that the Melbourne scene has fostered. I think if that was more prevalent in broader society, we'd be a much happier society.
Yeah, no, agreed, mate. Mate, let's finish up by giving you an opportunity to talk about how people who are listening can get in touch with you and find out where you're playing.
Great. So the best way to get in touch with us, if you'd like to talk to us, and we're always happy to receive any sort of correspondence, joyful sharing tales, you've just had a kid, your dog's had puppies, whatever it might be, we love hearing from people who love our music or like our music. The best way to engage with us is on Facebook through private message. Otherwise, you can always email the band at hybridnightmares.com. That's the best way to get in touch with us for a chat, if you like, and we're always all up for a chat. Otherwise, in terms of tour dates, media releases and those sort of things, hybridnightmares.com is the best way to get to keep abreast of what we're doing both in Australia and abroad. If you do feel so inclined and universal basic income does come to the front, you're more than welcome to tip into the coffers. The web shop is on the same website, hybridnightmares.com. And please, for goodness sake, share your stories, your favourite band, the best album you've heard all year. I painted this because I was thinking of how much I miss this person. Anything you feel like you might bring us joy, we want to hear about it because we love bringing people joy with what we do. It's a far cry from the message of, I suppose, galactic destruction and universal death that we talk about in our lyrics from a parody satirical perspective. But we are most interested in your joy, and we want to share our joy with you. So Facebook and email would be the best way. We'd like to be more prevalent on Twitter, but I could only compete with so many Portuguese robots before I start to lose what's left of my sanity. So I think Facebook is probably the best way to get a hold of us, or email. That's hybridnightmares.com or the band at hybridnightmares.com if you want to get in touch by email.
My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and you are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast. That was my conversation with Loki, one of the members of Melbourne-based Hybrid Nightmares. Thank you so much for listening.